Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
Talking About Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by my dad, Steve Davis, and his colleague at Talked About Marketing, David Olney, in which they explore marketing through the lens of their own 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apart from their love of words, they really love helping people. So they hope this podcast will become a trusted companion on your journey in business.
We're doing a bonus episode 10 of series 3 of Talking About Marketing because summer's upon us. We're going to keep reading, and David and I thought if you're after any ideas and suggestions for a summer reading list, well, we'll share with you some of the books we've enjoyed this year. I'm hoping it'll be a page turner this episode. So let's look through the books that we've enjoyed in 2023. They don't have to have been published in 2023, but we read them and they affected us. And so, David, I think for the sake of giving us something to do, why don't I start with my top 5 and we'll see if there's anything that matches.
That makes a lot of sense, seeing I actually listed them alphabetically. I cannot help being an ex-academic.
Okay, so just before I get to my top 5, number 5, and work my way up, there are a couple of honourable mentions that didn't make my list. So I'm going to sneak them in, David. One of them is called The Status Game by Will Storr, which I really enjoyed because it puts a lens over human interaction, that lens being what is happening to status in this situation. And it's a really impressive and persuasive way of looking at the world. And it certainly helped me, especially with that feeling when you move into a new group for the first time and you have that little bit of out-of-body experience as you try and get your bearings to understand what the heck is going on. And the fact that we read the room really quickly and instantly our brain works out where we think we sit in a pecking order. Fascinating stuff. But that's only an honourable mention, David.
Yeah, he's a great author because he goes deep into things that we think about and go, oh, it's too hard to work out. I don't have the month it will take to go and read. And instead, you just read one of his books when it comes out. So again, his book on storytelling was also very good and is, not a read from this year, but also deserves an honourable mention.
Do you think I should read the storytelling book?
You don't really need to, having gone through my big long paper and read my thesis.
Yep.
There's always good bits in there, but you could do a lot of other things with 9 hours.
All right. Another book that got an honourable mention is Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence by Dr. Anna Lemke. She's a psychiatrist and a professor at Harvard, and it was all on the chemical reactions that are going on when we withhold pleasure and we build up to it and then get that beautiful release versus the fact that everything in this world is trying to give us a pleasure, a dose of pleasure, whether it's a chocolate, just streaming stuff on Netflix, you name it, and the bad things that happen when we're waterlogged with so much pleasure. We just don't get to enjoy it very much. The insights for the book were excellent. I found the writing style becoming very tedious very quickly, and I could not finish the book.
Yeah, it's very much a case where this is a case where a ghostwriter could have added a lot of value because the ideas were great, but it's going to get to a smaller audience than it deserves by being an academic writer trying to write in a slightly more engaging way, but not really feeling confident about it.
Yeah, I didn't get much dopamine from the writing, I must say. I'm also going to slip in a fiction book that also, I know we're only meant to come up with 5 books, but these are also honourable mentions. This is a wild card, Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. This made the big difference. read by Maggie Gyllenhaal. So I listened to this book, 46 hours worth of it. I didn't want it to stop. The writing is amazing. The storylines are dense. The philosophical questions tossed up along the way were magnificent. The exchanges between characters were hilarious in part and frustrating others. I knew those people by the end of it. And Maggie's voice, dreamboat stuff. It was just so amazing. If you haven't dived into it, I don't think I could sit and read it, but listening was superb.
And if you're a Tolstoy fan, can heartily recommend Tandy Newton reading War and Peace. Again, there's something about, women in both cases reading these books that just gives it a different experience that I think is really good, because just more of the characters come to life, and being that Tolstoy was such a subtle author, I think women reading all the characters brings some of the female characters and the young male characters out in a different way, which really does put a new experience into these classic books.
Yeah, absolutely. And the last honourable mention is an essay. It's the quarterly essay, The Great Divide, Australia's Housing Mess and How to Fix It by Alan Kohler, which is free on Audible if you're an Audible person. It was a really interesting essay, charting the history of how we got to the point where housing is so scarce and so expensive. It's not 100% perfect, but it's a fascinating listen. Have you listened to it, David?
I have, and again, I like Alan Kohler's writing to an extent, but I've spent too much time with modern monetary theory economists and other progressive economists to be able to accept some of his underlying assumptions about how an economy works. I think he gets the history right, but some of his underlying assumptions, I'm like, I can tell that you're a journalist and you have to talk to normal people about normal things, because there's times where I'd like a bit more depth, but that's me being a pedantic researcher. And for most people, it's the best way to understand our housing crisis quickly.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Well worth listening to. All right, now to the task at hand. Top 5 books of 2023 for me, starting at number 5, is an oldie but a goodie. I found it on my shelf. I dug it out. It's by Seth Godin. It's called This is Marketing. It's a patchwork quilt of a book where you can stop at any bit of patchwork in the book, just read that chapter, and there's a nugget. I found myself using some of the stories from this book in my mentoring from the moment I read it as just another tool to help make sense of different situations. So that one's different. That's not, you didn't have that in your list, David.
No, it's one of those books where I think when I started the Strategic Communications Masters, I'm pretty sure I sat and listened to some of his TED Talks and some of his YouTube videos and went, this guy's amazing, but I've never got round to actually listening to the book. I'm not sure if you do enough YouTube and TED whether you need to, but I'd still like to.
Number 4 in my list, I'm surprised it's not on yours. It's You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar, 2nd edition by Dave Mattson, well, really David Sandler, but Dave Mattson has done the 2nd edition and enhanced it. We got completely besotted by this. We, all the way through season 3 of the podcast, we dived into bit by bit the Sandler Selling Submarine. It's such a refreshing, grounded approach to sales. David, why was this not on your list?
It wasn't on my list simply because I knew about it last year and had read a heap of material last year, for my job in America. So where you sort of put the thing on, I've read it this year, I'm like, it strictly fits in, but if I leave it off the list, we get a bit more diversity, because really I was very familiar by the end of last year.
All right. Number 3, Oscar by Matthew Sturgis. Absolutely engrossing biography of Oscar Wilde. Plenty of nuance, plenty of joy, plenty of frustration, lots of insights into human nature, and also insights into where we can all have blind spots in the way we interact in our lives. Engaging reading, lovely snippets, plenty of quotes and quips all the way through. A really gorgeous read. If you're enamoured of Oscar Wilde in any way, shape or form, highly recommended. I think you agree, David.
I would agree it's a great book, both for the author, who is just a brilliant biographer, and the narrator is fantastic. And I hope both of them do more sort of historical biography projects, and preferably together. Because, in the book, there's the wonderful section about the prison warden while Wilde is in jail, who's, a Marine major, become a warder at the end of his military career. And he sounds like this fascinating humanist. I know he's probably not a major historical figure, but I would like to see the author and narrator do a second book, all about him.
Yeah, that'd be good. Number 2 and number 1 also are on your list. So before we get to them, I'm going to pick off the orphans from your list. There's a book by Hiram Smith, You Are What You Believe, Simple Steps to Transform Your Life. I remember being smitten by this book when I listened to it. It's very short. I listened to it 2 or 3 times, and I've kind of forgotten it. I need to listen to it again. It's like a lolly that excites you when it's there and then disappears quickly. I'd be curious if I read it again to detect whether anything has stuck in my life. Why did it get on your list, and have you had a similar experience of its transience or not?
The transience, I think, was more of an issue that the minute we both finished reading that, I think we dived into one of these other books right at the top of our list almost immediately. I've revisited it twice during the year, so that people I'm mentoring, so that my mentees can go through it, and I'm familiar when I go through it with them. And as Hiram Smith says, there's nothing new in his book. Every generation has to relearn some very old things about how our beliefs shape our lives, and that if our beliefs don't meet our needs, the only thing we can change is our beliefs, because our needs remain the same. And each time I've revisited it to go through it with a mentee, I've just gone, this is a profound little book written by a really clever person who, even though his life was in corporate advisory in an earlier era, he would have fit in very well with the Roman Stoics. He would have happily been able to, argue in Athens, 2,400 years ago with any of the philosophers of the day and keep up no problems. So I love the fact he's taken such big ideas about what do you believe and do those beliefs meet your needs, and made them totally accessible for a modern audience.
Yeah, it's a great book. It is an enjoyable book. It's written in the form of a story as well, which is delightful. Another one of yours, not on my list, Antonio Damasio. It's called Feeling and Knowing, Making Minds Conscious. This is new to me. Is it good? Why is it on your list? I mean, obviously it's good for you. Why is it on your list?
It's very good because Antonio Damasio has probably been one of the top neuroscientists now for almost 25 years. And this book summarizes where he is now and where neuroscience has got now, and really acknowledges the fact that most living beings have some version of the feeling mind and a little bit of the thinking mind, and humans have a lot of feeling mind and a lot of thinking mind. And it's the balance between how what we are experiencing and feeling shapes what we think, and how we can consciously think about what we're thinking. And the important thing from my perspective, working with you and working with Rich in America, is more often than not, we're trying to reason out how to have a positive impact on people's day by putting information in front of them. But more often than not, that information is being absorbed and searched for from an emotional feeling perspective. And the better we can understand that, the better we can give people what they need while they're feeling an emotional drive to solve a problem or achieve a goal. And I find this book particularly good for underpinning, the neuroscience of why we want to solve problems, why we want to achieve our goals, and how to best put information in front of people so that they can absorb it in a way that immediately gives them a sense of that satisfies my need or moves me closer to my goal.
You remind me, I've got things lined up for season 4 of our podcast with some accidental overlaps between the brain wanting to fill gaps and close things out and the way AI operates, but more on that next year. The last one that's not on my list, but it's on yours, Baldassare Castiglione, The Book of the Courtier. Yes, I remember you going on and on about this one. Why did it grab you so much?
So I will have a go at saying his name, and I may not be right either, but I've asked a few Italian speakers, and the closest I can get to their pronunciation is Baldassare Castiglione, which is probably still not right. And sorry, dead dude, I wish I could say your name better. The reason this book is so amazing is because I spend so much time advising people and mentoring people, and that is a real art in itself that you learn as you go along. And there's a bit of decent literature, but until I found the Book of the Courtier, I hadn't found the book for being a mentor, being an advisor. And really, most people know about Machiavelli writing The Prince, and really it is kind of the garbage book of Renaissance Italy compared to Castiglione's book. Castiglione's book is utterly amazing because instead of trying to ingratiate himself by going, "Hey, Prince, I'm giving you all the dirty tricks for winning," instead of doing that, Castiglione is saying, how do I work in a court potentially for decades? How do I advise someone immensely powerful? How do I give them best counsel, be useful, but also never be unethical or crush my moral compass? And I love the fact that he's talking about how do you be ethical and moral and be a good advisor to people who have more power than you, more influence than you, and who make decisions first and foremost to serve their own needs. And I think it's probably the best single book ever written on this topic. And the other thing I really love about the book is, he in Renaissance Italy realized actually you do need to pay attention to the women in the court because they don't have the direct power of the count or the duke, but indirectly they know everything that's going on and they have a great ability to impact everything that's going on. So he's really talking about how do you implicitly understand power and how do you implicitly influence it? Because as an advisor, you also don't have direct power in the way that the women of his era didn't have direct power. So it's got a wonderful subversive angle to it of very early feminism and very early understanding of if you don't have explicit power, how are you going to have an implicit influence?
So yes or no, should I be listening to the Book of the Courtier at some point soon?
Yes, I think everyone who has to advise anyone or help people make decisions where they have the power and the decision-making role, but you want to be as helpful as possible and you don't want to do it in a way that damages you ethically or morally, this is a must-read for everyone in any kind of role like that.
Grazie. So now we're at number 2 of the top 5 books of 2023. And number 2 is Change Your Questions, Change Your Life by Marilee Adams. It's also on your list, David. This is a masterstroke. I find this whole paradigm of judger thinking and learner thinking and judger questions and learner questions is everywhere. It's like you slip glasses on and you can suddenly see it's everywhere. In every interaction, people are either, although there's some neutral scenarios, but typically shutting down the other person and judging in their answer, to being dismissive, making assumptions and living on that, versus learning, being driven by curiosity, being driven by grace to give the other person respect and to truly understand their rationale. And I've been doing my best to incorporate this in my interactions with people around me, and I feel like it's having a positive effect.
Yeah, that is very much how I feel about it too. I had read the second edition probably in 2012 or 2013 and had internalized it so completely in my teaching of complex problem solving, both in the university setting and out in the consultancy world, that I'd actually forgotten how long it had been since I read it. And it was only this year, again, when I wanted to go through it with mentees and people I'm advising, where I went, hang on, I need to revisit this. Oh, wow, there's a 4th edition. And the great thing with the 4th edition is it's written as an allegory. It's written as a story where you follow the central character through. And the way Marilee Adams writes, the story has got even better, and the underpinning of learner and judge are thinking with neuroscience means when you're dealing with someone skeptical now, you can lay out the neuroscience that supports her argument. And really importantly now, you can say, look, these are ideas that have worked brilliantly for her and her clients for 24 years. You know, her wonderful comment in the 4th edition of we're all judges in recovery. We're all just trying to be learning more of the time is a beautiful way to understand that it's hard sometimes to have an open mind and not be dismissive and not want to be right. But as often as possible, if we can listen and ask questions to learn and let people talk and then ask them another question to get a deeper insight into what they're saying, it's nearly always the path to having a better understanding of others and a better relationship with the people in our lives.
We are all judges in recovery, absolutely. And that's the humility that runs through it as well, which is probably where you need to be to take that learner mindset. Bring people along with you as you discover together. You can still have the hard conversations, but you can do it with respect. Then the number one book of 2023, I think this will have a lasting impact on my life forever. It's called The Expectation Effect by David Robson. It's on your list too, David. Are you happy to crown this as number one?
Oh, I think absolutely, because the big thing that came through for me reading The Expectation Effect is you can put everything about being a learner into making better use of David's book. So it fits so well, it and Marilee Adams together, as if you read these two books together, they so positively reinforce each other.
It's good. The Expectation Effect goes into the science in just about every aspect of our life where what we're expecting, our expectations dictate the outcomes we're about to experience. And I'll just give one quick example. I shared this with David last week on the way to something where I was actually overwhelmed. I had so much work to get done before the Christmas break. I was starting to feel dread and drowning. And I remember David Robson saying from one of the areas that you can't magically make this overload go away, but you can think about it differently. And I, in that moment, thought, what if I imagine this is like a huge swell and I'm on a surfboard and what I can do is use the energy, the power in it and meet it with a surfboard and surf over it, surf through it. It's still there. It's amazing how quickly the stress levels dropped. I gained composure again. Nothing else had changed. I just reshaped it. And it reminded me of one thing David Robson says. With these approaches in understanding the expectation effect is your brain fully knows that little trick that you just created with the surfing, and it still works. It's just priceless. Thank you, David, for recommending this book to me. It is, with great pleasure, the number one book of 2023. And yes, a pigeon pair to read with Change Your Questions, Change Your Life, Marilee Adams, edition 4. That'll set you off for a fantastic 2024.
Yeah, really, the two books together, and there's not many situations where you won't be able to reframe how you're thinking about it, what you expect to happen next, and how you're going to interact with people in the situation. You'll be more empowered and more than likely get better outcomes from the combination of the two books.
And we're just going to finish off this bonus episode with a couple of other bonus statistics. We'll put links to these in the show notes. The top blogs from the Talked About Marketing website in 2023. Here they are. Number 5, Airbnb does not want us staying on Air Peninsula this holiday season, which was a plotting of the story of, I guess, a reminder to all of us if we have automated systems to stay on top of them and make sure that what's being promised matches the reality. After I had a hideous run of booking Airbnbs only to get cancelled because the owner would say, it shouldn't be listed, or we're redecorating, or whatever. And it was just a whammy of them, a triple whammy actually led to that post. Number 4, this is going back a little bit too, but it was still there. Kindness in business, a pathway to profit and happiness. This was written before your time, before you joined us, David. And I think, as we just heard from the Marilee Adams work, it's amazing how instinctively that sort of sentiment was being captured even before she put her structure around it.
Yeah, it's a strange continuity, isn't it? That
Yes.
This idea just keeps recurring in different places at different times. How far listening and being kind will get you.
Number 3 is a marketer's Christmas message written with ChatGPT, which I can't remember doing. So it must have been done last year. So, wow, that goes back a little bit. Number 3, this one I wrote many, many years ago. Number 2, sorry. I can't believe it's still floating there, but it's often referred to. 3 updated reasons for using odd-numbered lists in your blog post titles. It's an oldie but a goodie. And the absolute winner, that from the moment I wrote it till this day, it just gets traffic like you wouldn't believe. How to humble brag on LinkedIn like a pro, if you want to. And unfortunately, humble bragging is still rife on LinkedIn. David, can we just hold our hands together and pray for humble bragging to disappear from LinkedIn, where people say, oh, I'm deeply honoured and humbled to be included on a panel of amazing speakers who are the leaders in their field, etc., where you're trying to sound humble, but you're bragging, and everyone knows it. And it's, I don't know, I find it toxically superficial.
I'd rather they just said, I'm excited, and left it at that. Like, just be honest. You're either excited or you're not.
Yeah. And then to finish things off, our podcast, talking about marketing, the most listened to episodes of 2023. And we have, I went for the top 5, but because of some of them having the same number of downloads, there's some tying. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's 7 altogether. Here we go, from 7 to number 1, words to make the world do your bidding, which is a ripper, very handy, that little hook on how to write copy more persuasively. What sunglasses would heroes wear, which was there was a whole lot covered in there, but particularly the Le Specs sunglasses ads we talked about. The slot machine of human status. Then we've got social media and the share-worthy case of digital fatigue, which was from earlier this year, or 2023, looking at how much we're fatiguing with our exposure to all that junk that's constantly shared on social media. Finding your story to tell is next. Belonging to the brand. And then number 2 and number 1, understanding the meganet was number 2. And number 1, the road less stupid. How much do you think the title of that episode made it number 1 and most listened to, David, versus the...
I think that probably had a huge impact. The title is just so awesome because the title of Keith Cunningham's book is so awesome. So we had something wonderful to run with. I'm really pleasantly surprised that number 2 was number 2 because that's a sort of fairly deep dive into some very strange stuff about technology. But I'm really pleased to hear that people are interested in those kind of deep dives into strange technology.
Yeah, it's weird. And I'm glad that the words to make the world do your bidding is there. I'm still using that 27-word sentence to help whenever I've got to do copywriting or I'm mentoring someone. It's all there.
Yeah, if I could ever get a tattoo and see it, I would be very tempted to make it that 27 words.
And there's a thought for you as a Christmas bonus in your stocking. Imagine a nude David walking down the street to you with the 27 words to make the world do your bidding tattooed across his back.
Ow.
Would you sit next to him in the bus? That's the question.
Only once I put my T-shirt back on.
All right, on that note, thanks for journeying together, David Olney, this year. We've got plenty to talk about in 2024. Happy reading, happy listening, happy talking.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Steve and David always welcome your comments and questions, so send them to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. And finally, the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.